In this video, I'm going to be showing you just one of many thousands, billions of ways to create a drawing of expressive hands. For your project in class, you're going to be allowed to use any materials you want, but you're all going to start with pencil and eraser. So let's start there. Now I'm going to be doing a drawing of both of my hands. Because I'm doing a drawing of both of my hands, I've taken a photograph of my hands first, and I'm using that as a reference because I want to make sure that I am able to see at all times what the hand should look like. Now I'm using an A3 paper, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just freehand draw some margins on it to make my image just a little bit smaller and give me space to test out materials and decide what I like, because I'm going to use my margins as a testing ground. Alright, so I'm going to start by drawing the hand. Now, before you've done this, you would have started by learning how to pay attention to the basic structure of the hand using some guidelines. So I'm going to start there. I'm just going to draw my hands out using some guidelines to get a rough idea of where everything is before refining it. So I want to have a basic understanding of the positions of the hands. So for example, right now I can see that I haven't angled it up high enough, and it's made this whole image too low. Compositionally, it's made far too much negative space at the top of the image. I don't like it, I'm not happy with it, so before I get too far, I'm able to erase and restart. Okay, this is the reason we start lightly. We always draw lightly because you can always erase if you need to. Okay, so I've brought the wrist up a little bit. I'm going to bring the angle up for the hand, and then for the second hand where the fingers cross over it, I'm going to bring it up like this. Now I feel like that has made a somewhat better composition. I'm going to bring that hand down, but I don't want to forget to draw the rest of this hand first before I do that, because I want to get that thumb in place, because it's going to show me how much I can see of the other thumb and the other wrist as it comes down. Now you can see that as I was drawing, I broke off from just drawing a general structure, starting to draw sort of outlines. They're not final outlines, they're just kind of a rough idea of it, but I'm going to be using those to refine my image. Okay. So now that I've done a good preliminary drawing of my hands and I have the basic structure in, I want to erase any of the excessively hard lines because I don't want them showing through. I'm planning on using inks, maybe some watercolor, to do sort of the expressive coloring that is going to show up on this painting. And I want to make sure that my pencil lines are as light as possible, because I don't want them to show through too significantly. Inks and watercolors can function a bit like a shellac, so once you're done, you won't be able to erase any of your pencil lines. So you want to make sure they're as light as possible. So the first image didn't come out so well because I actually spilled right across it, so I needed to restart. So I've redrawn my image. This time I'm working on watercolor paper because I've had an idea. I'm actually going to use oil pastel, white oil pastel, to draw sort of skeleton inside the hands, and then the Brusho watercolors that I'm going to be using will do a wax resist over top of them. So now I need to roughly draw in the skeleton, the different sections of the skeleton to kind of make the effect. Now you can see my pastel's a little dirty. I probably should have checked that this pastel was clean before I started actually drawing on the page. So my bad. Just want to rough it in. I don't want it to look perfect. I'm not trying to make it look perfect. I'm just trying to get the idea of the joints as they come down and the different bones that hold the wrist together, just to kind of get an impression of a skeleton running through this. So on this side, oh, there's a little bit of blue on there. On this side, I'm gonna have to do a bit of the forearm. Oh, I probably should have left that blank where my tattoo is, but oh well. Mistake's been made. Just gotta learn how to use my mistakes. Probably make those bones a little bit bigger. It's always tricky to draw in white because you can't actually see exactly what it is you're doing. So it does make it trickier. Kind of do the impression of the bones in the distance over there, and hopefully that'll work out. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and apply some Brusho to this. So Brusho is a powdered watercolor form. I am not hugely familiar with it, but this is my excuse to experiment and play. So in this case, I've put it in a palette and I've added some water to it to treat it more like a watercolor, just because it's a little bit more vibrant than the watercolors we have here at school. And I'm going to use that to create the colors I want. Okay, so that's roughly the color I want. Now, whenever you use oil pastel and then apply a water-based material over top of it, you get this resist effect that's happening. And that is because the oil in the oil pastel prevents the water from sticking, because obviously oil and water don't go together. So I'm gonna make use of that wonderful fact to kind of put the first base layers of color down. Now remember, I'm trying to make an expressive image, not necessarily a realistic image. So I just want to kind of get an idea of what's going on, but I'm going to refine it through a lot of different layers. Now, right now, I'm using a heat gun to dry my image so I can do another layer and it not get so messy as it did on my first failed attempt. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in some brighter colors. I want to highlight sort of the ruddy sections of the skin. Now, ruddy kind of refers to the parts that have the most blood flow. So I want to try to pick the right red for this effect. Yeah, kind of like that one, I think. Okay, so I'm going to use that to highlight any spots that are just a little bit more red on this hand of mine. So for example, the knuckles. Okay, so now that I've marked in those red areas a bit more, I'm going to start adding some detail with some of the brown to help define the space. So I'm going to use this dark brown, and it's going to allow me to kind of refine some of these areas. Now I probably will go over this in the end with some ink just to really make some of the sketchy areas more certain in my image. Okay, so now that I've got sort of a bit of these impressions in, I want to add in the next sort of color scheme that I'm planning on adding, which is some greens and blues. So once again, I'm going to dry my image before adding in the next colors. Okay, so while I was drawing this, I had a thought, and I'm thinking I'm going to sort of make a bit of a Lady Macbeth sort of character, out damned spot and all the rest of it, out of these hands. So let's see how that goes. Now, what I wanted to add was a bit of the green and the blue. So let's get a bit of water into this, and we can see this nice sort of green color come out. I'm going to use it to block in little bits of green onto her hand, which I think really works well for Lady M, since, you know, there should be a bit of jealousy on there. Remember, I'm not trying to make realistic hands. I am trying to make ones that express an emotion and an effect. I'm using the colors I can see in the skin to accentuate what's going on in this image and take it sort of beyond my original expectations of what this hands will look like. Okay, so I've blocked in a little bit of that. Now I think the next step for using color is, because I'm going with Lady Macbeth, I probably want to add some things that look a little bit like drops of blood, her obsession with the blood being splattered on her. So I'm just going to start by having sort of drops all over the background. Okay, so now that I've got those sort of red spots, I'm gonna add just a little bit of red under her nails, just to kind of highlight that. Just sort of ingrained into her nails. So she's not entirely mad, but we can see a little bit of what she's seeing. Okay, so now I'm going to let that dry overnight, and then tomorrow morning I'm going to rough in some black lines, which will finish this image up, hopefully, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so over the course of the night, I've let the image dry completely, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a brush ink pen, a couple fine tip pens, and possibly a white gel pen to just add a bit more refinement and detail into my expressive piece. So I think I'm going to start straight in with the brush pen and get some thick lines, but of course I want to test it before I do it just to see how it's going to work on this paper, which is why I do a little scribble here in the margins just to be sure. Okay, so now that I'm happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and add in some of the detail that I want to add.